Welcome to Skytech-Lens. Have you ever wondered how a tomato ends up in your salad? It's a journey shaped by invisible trade deals and logistics. But in 2019, that journey was upended. The US abruptly scrapped a decades-old trade pact with Mexico, slapping a 17.5% tariff on every Mexican tomato at the border. This wasn't a minor tweak. It threatened a multi-billion-dollar industry and countless livelihoods on both sides. Prices soared for Americans. For Mexican growers, it was a disaster. But crisis breeds innovation. Instead of accepting defeat, Mexico looked beyond the US to Canada. In a bold move, Mexico rerouted its entire tomato supply chain, investing billions to bypass the US altogether. This is the story of how a tomato trade war redrew the map of North American commerce, and what it means for the future of global trade. Let's dive in. For 25 years, the US-Mexico Tomato Suspension Agreement kept the market stable. Mexican growers invested heavily, relying on this pact. Suddenly, the US withdrew, citing complaints from Florida growers about unfair competition. Instead of reform, the US imposed a steep 17.5% tariff, effective immediately. Trucks already en route faced massive, unexpected taxes. Mexican exporters were thrown into chaos. Profit margins vanished overnight. The market, once stable, was now in turmoil. Growers scrambled, pay the tariff, let produce rot, or find another way. The financial hit was staggering, hundreds of millions in new duties. US importers and distributors faced impossible choices: absorb costs or pass them to retailers and consumers. Trust between business partners frayed. Retailers faced sudden price hikes, and the entire supply chain was on edge. The psychological shock was as great as the financial one. Years of cooperation were undone in a single move. The tariff sent a clear message: North American trade rules could change overnight. Analysts predicted tomato prices could jump 40–85% for US consumers, especially as domestic supply waned. The promise of protecting a few growers came at the cost of penalizing millions of consumers and disrupting a vast logistics network. Trucks backed up at the border, frantic calls filled the air, and uncertainty reigned. No one knew how long the tariffs would last. The simple journey of a tomato had become a logistical nightmare. For Mexican growers, the question was clear: could they ever trust the US market again? The tariff shockwave forced an entire industry to rethink its future. The US had created a vacuum of certainty, and Mexico was about to fill it, with a new strategy. The fallout was just beginning. The tomato trade had changed forever. The US had drawn a red line, and Mexico was ready to cross it. The next move would reshape the continent's supply chains. The world was watching. The stakes had never been higher. Trade policy became personal fast. Tomato prices spiked in grocery stores, sometimes by over 50%. For many families, a salad staple became a luxury. Food banks and community kitchens could do less with their budgets. The tariff, meant to protect a few, hit every American who bought tomatoes, especially the most vulnerable. US businesses relying on Mexican tomatoes, trucking firms, warehouses, distributors, food processors, saw costs soar and supply chains break down. A salsa company in Texas faced a 17.5% jump in costs overnight. Absorb it or pass it to customers and risk losing business. The ripple effect hit jobs. Importers, distributors, and processors employed tens of thousands. As imports faltered, layoffs and hour cuts followed, especially in border states. Ironically, a policy to protect Florida farms destroyed jobs elsewhere. In Mexico, the impact was even harsher. The tomato industry supports over 1 million jobs. With the US market suddenly hostile, packing houses slowed, harvests shrank, and incomes plummeted. Border bottlenecks made things worse. Trucks faced new inspections and delays, bad news for perishable tomatoes. More waste, higher costs, and more risk for everyone. The tariff didn't just raise prices, it fractured the economic ecosystem, pitting states and industries against each other. The fallout showed how deeply North America's economies are intertwined. A single policy in Washington could change paychecks in Arizona and family dinners in Chicago. The tariff was a blunt instrument causing widespread collateral damage. The lines on the map weren't just borders, they were economic lifelines. Severing them had real, painful consequences. The tomato trade war was a wake-up call. The cost of protectionism was now clear to everyone. The search for a solution was on. Mexico was about to make its move. The world would soon see what resilience looked like. Facing disaster, Mexico didn't wait for the US to change course. Instead, it launched a bold Plan B. The solution bypassed the US entirely and connect directly with Canada. Enter the CPKC to Mexico Rail Corridor, a direct refrigerated rail line from Mexico's farms to Canadian markets. This wasn't just a new route, it was a new economic lifeline. Trains could carry hundreds of truckloads, slashing transit times and cutting emissions. The key inbound rail shipments. Sealed at the Mexican border, these trains passed through the U.S. without entering its commerce. No tariffs, no delays. The first customs check? Canada. Mexico invested billions in new infrastructure, refrigerated warehouses, intermodal terminals, and specialized rail cars. The project moved at lightning speed. Permits were fast-tracked, capital mobilized, and the first trains rolled out in record time. The message to the U.S. was clear: if you build barriers, we'll build a way around them. Canada too saw the benefits. A direct, reliable supply chain was a win for its retailers and consumers. The rail corridor turned a bilateral dispute into a trilateral opportunity, on Mexico and Canada's terms. The logistics map of North America was redrawn. Mexico's rapid pivot showed that geography doesn't guarantee economic integration. Political will does. The tomato train became a symbol of independence and innovation. The U.S. was no longer the only gateway. Mexico and Canada were now partners in a new trade era. The world took notice. The tomato's journey had changed forever. The next chapter was about to begin. The stakes were now continental. As Mexico re-engineered its supply chains, Canada seized the moment. Canadian retailers, tired of U.S. volatility, jumped at the chance for direct, stable access to Mexican produce. Major chains like Loblaws and Sobeys negotiated multi-year contracts with Mexican growers, bypassing U.S. middlemen. For Mexican producers, these deals brought financial security and a new primary market. For Canadians, it meant fresh tomatoes at stable prices, even as U.S. shelves emptied. Canada invested in cold chain infrastructure and new intermodal terminals to handle the influx. The government streamlined customs, ensuring the new rail corridor delivered on its promise of speed and reliability. Canada transformed from a secondary market into a major North American hub. While the U.S. built walls, Canada built bridges and railways. The result, a fundamental realignment of produce trade. Mexico gained a $2.8 billion market. Canada gained a stable food supply and a strategic edge. The new alliance insulated both countries from U.S. political turbulence. Canada didn't just fill a gap, it redrew the economic map to its own advantage. For Mexico, Canada became the partner the U.S. used to be. Stable, predictable, and committed to growth. The partnership was lucrative for both sides. The U.S. was left watching from the sidelines. The balance of power had shifted. The Mexico-Canada rail corridor was more than a tomato fix. It was a global wake-up call. Countries worldwide saw the power of strategic infrastructure to bypass protectionism. Suddenly, nations began rethinking their own supply chain vulnerabilities. The tomato trade war became a case study in turning crisis into opportunity. For the U.S., the consequences were immediate. Key border towns lost business as trade rerouted north. The U.S. had built a toll booth, Mexico built a new highway. If this model worked for tomatoes, why not for avocados, electronics, or cars? The CPKC rail network now offered a direct link from Mexico's factories to Canada and the U.S. Midwest. The U.S. risked becoming just a land bridge, not a market. The lesson borders are now defined by logistics, not just geography. Mexico and Canada created a new economic border, one that flowed with efficiency, not friction. The world moved toward route shoring, investing in resilient supply lines, not just friendly partners. The legacy, a shift from fragile, single-route supply chains to diversified, robust networks. The U.S., trying to protect a small industry, taught the world a lesson in risk management. The journey of a single tomato ended up charting a new course for global trade. Sometimes the best response to a closed door is to build a new one. The tomato trade war became a saga of modern trade, and a lesson in resilience. Mexico's $2.8 billion pivot wasn't just defense, it was a masterstroke in innovation and diversification. By investing in a direct rail corridor, Mexico secured its future and reduced its vulnerability to U.S. politics. The U.S., trying to protect a small sector, may have accelerated its own decline as North America's trade hub. The sight of trains bypassing U.S. ports is a symbol of this new reality. The future belongs to those who adapt, prioritize resilience, and build stable partnerships. The Great Tomato Trade War planted the seeds of a new era, where infrastructure and alliances matter most. What do you think? Did the U.S. overplay its hand? Could this model reshape global trade? Let us know in the comments. Thanks for watching. Subscribe to the channel for more updates.